Good evening, everyone. Good evening, bonjour, bonsoir à tous. It's wonderful to be here. I'm Mike Perry, and I have the honor of being the executive director of the Institute for Change Leaders. Thank you. It's been a real honor the past year at the helm of the Institute, having been able to take over for the mayor, the force of nature known simply as Olivia, as she returned to her political life as mayor. And we've been doing lots of great things at ICL and are looking forward to more good things and trainings and public events to come. So please watch this space for what we call now ICL 2.0. With that, these are the Layton Legacy Awards for our friend, our comrade, one of our mentors, Jack Layton. And being able to do the welcome today, I have the privilege of being able to say, my friends, love is better than anger. Hope is better than fear. Optimism is better than despair. So let us be loving, let us be hopeful and optimistic, and we'll change the world. So here. So with Jack setting the stage for us with his values and his commitment and his words, let's proceed to honor and celebrate his legacy, his commitment, and also the work that he has inspired with the recipients this evening of the Layton Legacy Awards. I want to also, of course, acknowledge as we start that we're on the traditional territory of many nations, the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Miccosagi Anishinabeg, the Chippewa, and the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples. And it's now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people. Being Métis myself, I want to acknowledge my ancestral granny, Niganakijiak, from the Anishinabeg Minaname, the people of the wild rice. And as we look around Toronto, what's known today as Toronto, amid the skyscrapers and all of the asphalt, we still see the shining waters of the lake. We can imagine canoes transferring and being on those lakes for thousands of years. We can also find our parks, our green spaces, to be people of the land, and look up above those skyscrapers to the wonderful sky. And we still commune here, even in this city, with animals, creation, and nature. And so I just want to acknowledge the land that we're on and that relationship we're all drawn into to steward this land, given the dish with one spoon wampum. So just briefly, I'd mentioned being the executive director of the Institute for Change Leaders. And what does ICL do? Well, in a nutshell, we equip people from all walks of life with cutting-edge leadership, storytelling, and concrete organizing skills to win the transformative and sustainable lasting change that they and their communities want to see. And we base this work on the model of legendary organizer Marshall Gans, who worked with Cesar Chavez, civil rights movement, and also with the United Farmers Workers Movement, and has a history here actually in Toronto of labor activism, and of course, being instrumental in the 2008 Obama presidential campaign. So equipping people from all walks of life with cutting-edge leadership, storytelling, and organizing skills. Sound like anyone familiar? You know, perhaps Canada's dynamic duo politically of Olivia Chow and Jack Layton. So I think it's extra fitting, and we're very honored to be able to be welcoming people here and co-hosting this event with the Douglas Layton the Caldwell Layton Foundation. So Jack Layton was a joyful and passionate activist and leader, and we all have our stories and memories of Jack. He really believed in collective strength and organizing for that transformative change in every conceivable way. He was a visionary advocate for progressive change. He was also practical. He was a doer and worked at all levels in partnership and creating those relationships that led to change. And a key component of this legacy project, the Layton Legacy Project, for which the awards are a hallmark tonight, was to continue to encourage and support new waves of activism and leadership in terms of established groups and emerging groups and leaders committed to progressive values and making that change in their community. So let's acknowledge the contribution of Jack Layton and of his legacy and those who continue, as we all do in this room, to be inspired by Jack. Alors, encore une fois, j'ai oublié de vous souhaiter la bienvenue en français. Alors, bienvenue à cette soirée, à ce spectacle extraordinaire. Et on va raconter des histoires, les valeurs et surtout le legacy de la vie de Jack. Et puis, alors, on va continuer en anglais et français. And if I were a better Métis citizen, I'd also address you in Michif. However, I still need some work on that language. All that is to say, we're thrilled to be co-hosting with the Douglas Caldwell Layton Foundation, and I'd like to ask Jack Bijak to come now into the stage and continue the welcome. Josh, please.
Thank you so much, Mike. That was very kind. Much appreciated. Thank you all for being here tonight. I'd also like to take a moment and thank everybody who is watching online. Welcome to now the third annual Jack Layton Legacy Awards ceremony. This year we did things a little bit different. In honor of Jack, we actually combined the Jack Layton activism training we do every year into one action-packed day. So we did that all day today. I'd like to thank the members of the ICL who came out and did that training. Maybe we can give them a round of applause. Thank you. And some of the participants are still here with us as well. So thank you for making that day so special and all of your help in us preparing this room tonight. I acknowledge you and I thank you. The Douglas Caldwell Layton Foundation is a charity that was founded by Tommy Douglas over 50 years ago. Over the last few years, we've revitalized it. We've brought it back to life. Just not too long ago, we found original documents within our archives that give us a roadmap to what Tommy Douglas originally wanted us to do. He wanted a place to educate people about politics, government, and civil engagement. And that's what we're doing. And I'm very proud to say, in a very short period of time, we've come a long way. We now have a lecture series in 8 different lectures on 8 different topics in 8 different cities at 8 different universities, which is astonishing. And we've done that in a very short period of time. We've got a board of directors that supports the vision, but we also have sponsors who make it possible for us to do the work. So I want to take a moment and say thank you to our sponsors of tonight's event, QP Ontario, the IBEW 353, OECTA, the Ontario English Catholic Teachers Association, Iron Workers Local 721, Goldblatt Partners, LLP, ETFO, the Elementary Teachers Federation of Ontario, Molson Coors Canada, as our reception sponsor. Thank you, Molson. The Labour Council, Toronto York Region District Labour Council. So thank you so much. Cavan Advertising. And then to our annual partners. So these are the organizations that fund all of our work throughout the year. The United Steelworkers, thank you. The Professional Institute of the Public Service of Canada, PIPS, the Canadian Teachers Federation, UFCW Canada, and AMAPSIO. So those are our annual partners. I'm looking to grow those, so if you know people, please direct them to me. I should also thank the folks here at the Steelworkers Hall. Abdul, who's been helping us all day. And then also to our AV and tech crew who've been so gracious and patient with us. So thank you. Okay, so it's time to get into this next part of the agenda. I've said we're doing things a bit differently this year. So as opposed to doing the awards first, this year, we're going to really take our time and dig in deep about Jack Layton, his legacy, and his relationship with the labor movement, and in particular, workers' rights. So we've got a dynamic panel of some of Jack's closest confidants, friends, and colleagues. And so I'd like to invite everyone who is joining us on the panel tonight to come on up and take the stage, and Brad Levine will be introducing each of you at that time. Thank you.
Check one, check one. Can we hear me now? Wonderful. I see thumbs up. Excellent. How's everyone doing? Yeah, good. Thank you so much, Josh, and thank you so much, Mike. It's a real honor to be here tonight, acknowledging the Layton Awards, but also with such an esteemed group of folks on the panel. We're here tonight to talk about Jack Layton's legacy as it pertains to his involvement and support from and with the labor movement in this country. These folks, and I was told, do not go into too deep of the bios. They need very little introduction to the folks here with us tonight. I'm joined by Ken Newman, former Canadian Director of the United Steelworkers, absolute stalwart supporter of Jack during the times, at least I worked with Jack, of course. Peggy Nash, former Member of Parliament for the great riding of Parkdale High Park, and a former labor activist in the Canadian Auto Workers. And of course, John Cartwright, who is obviously known to all in this room, former leader for many years of the Toronto York District Labour Council, and a very active member of the Council of Canadians. Great panel. Thank you all for making time to join us tonight. And today we're here to kind of amplify our understanding of Jack's commitment and connection to the trade union movement and the labor movement in this country. It was extensive for sure, and we've got three incredible individuals who will speak to it all. We're going to talk about a number of issues, and Josh is going to give me the signal as to when we need to wind up, because we're a bit off our original schedule. So I don't know if we've got about half an hour or so. But I want to start off tonight and ask each individual in turn, and maybe Ken, I'll start with you, because you're on my immediate right or left and stage right. But I want to get from you, when you first connected with Jack as a labor leader, because you were obviously involved in the labor movement when Jack was becoming leader, very active in the party, Ken, and maybe start with who you were supporting in that 2003 leadership race, and talk a little bit about how you first connected, and then we'll go to Peggy and then to John. Where did you first meet Jack, and how was your connection with Mr. Layton at the outset?
Well, thank you very much, Brad, and it's an honor to be here and talk about our good friend and great leader, Jack Layton. The first time I ever met Jack was in 2003 in Vancouver. At that time, I was the Western Director for the Steelworkers out of Vancouver. And in 2004, after Jack became leader, I only came to Toronto in April of 2004. So shortly after he was leader, I moved out to Toronto, and that's where our relationship continued to build. But the first time I met him is that obviously Jack knew my background in regards to being a regional director in British Columbia, where I've had the opportunity of having worked with the BC NDP government, the Saskatchewan, the Manitoba, and the Yukon. And the one thing about the steelworkers, they've always been partisan. I must say that at that meeting is that Jack was soliciting my support to run as leader. Unfortunately, I decided that I was not going to support him. I supported Bill Blakey, who was obviously, everybody knows, from Manitoba. Now, I think that if we had enough time here, I could tell you a story in regards to my track record, which is not good. when it comes to
We have time, Ken. We have time.
it's not good.
We're wide open. The
It's
bar's
not good
open.
when it comes to selecting leaders, because in each of the leadership reviews. But one of the things I did say to Jack at that time is that I'll tell you one thing: is that the minute that the membership decides who's the leader is going to be, I can assure you the steelworkers will give you 150% of the support. And I remember Jack commenting years going by that that's exactly what we did. And we built a relationship that was second to none in regards to, he was our ally. Our union had a great opportunity because, there's not a picket line that he wasn't at. There wasn't a union hall throughout the country that he wasn't at. He got involved in some of the major struggles that we had, not just on a local level in regards to what we do in Canada, but I can also share a story about something that happened in another very serious matter that I was involved with for a period of 12 years. That I can talk about. But when we gave him the honorary membership card, Jack, I've seen him at many rallies, and one I can point out to is that we had the big, terrible strike at Sudbury, where 3,000 people, after Valley took over from Inco and basically run it into the ground and then come after the workers, we ended up on strike. And I remember Jack getting up at the speaking in front of thousands and thousands of people at the hall, and he would go into his wallet and he'd pull out his steelworker membership card. He says, "This is my honorary membership card from the steelworkers, and I hold it right next to my healthcare card." And you could always see the twinkle in his eye, the pride that he had an organization, that labor movement that basically was there walking step in step with him. But I'll stop at that point. But that's when I first met Jack in regards to our relationship working forward. And I also can tell you about an international story which warms my heart for the work that he's done on that.
Well, let's get to that, because tonight is about sharing stories, because I think we learn a lot about sharing stories. And just one quick one, just to pause on the steelworkers for a second before we get to Peggy and John. You folks, yeah, even though, Ken, you're right about how quickly USW came. When Jack had the idea, the audacity, I would describe it, to buy a building in 2003, when the federal Liberals were bringing in no more union or corporate donations to political parties, he had a 5-month window, and he was sitting there at the CEP building with Foucault, and he was looking across the street. I'm going to buy that building because we need a building, and he did it. And when he came in and he said, and Bob Gallagher, who's here tonight, we were sitting there, and Jack comes in, and he goes, "I'm going to buy a building." We had no money to pay the staff, let alone buy real estate in downtown Ottawa in 2003. And we said, "Okay, Jack, that sounds great." We got back to work. Steelworkers,
First one.
came in right away. A major commitment, and you folks were the pace car. You folks set the stage, and then CAW followed, UFCW followed, QP National followed. So, if I don't get the chance to say it again, Ken, you and the steelworkers were there with Jack every step of the way in building the party, and what he was able to build. And that building, and it's got the plaque there, and your USW is right there in the front. You folks were crucial to doing that. So a quick sidebar story. Peggy Nash, tell us your first encounter with Jack Layton. And give us your story about what that meant, and how the heck did he talk you into getting into politics?
I sometimes wonder that.
And you still curse him, I'm sure.
No, I don't. I thank him every day for it. I knew Jack as a city councillor in Toronto. I'm a Toronto person, and I was part of and I knew Jack as a city councillor because he was an activist city councillor. He was always punching through the media, doing stuff that got recognized, irritated the right wing on city council for sure. And I was part of, the NDP had been a little bit low key at that point. And it was, he was on city council, and a bunch of us got together and we were part of this movement called the New Politics Initiative. We really wanted to, move the activism into electoral politics and bring community organizations into electoral politics. And it didn't succeed, but I felt that when Jack decided to run, he kind of captured that energy and that activism, and it was part of his leadership campaign. And I did support Jack for the leadership. But I wasn't a Westerner. I understand loyalty. And after he became leader, he asked me several times to run. And, usually for women, it takes, 5 or 6 times before you do it. And I'm not sure whether I had agreed yet, but I did run in 04, 06, 08, 11, and 15. So I guess whatever he said, it made a difference. But I do want to just tell a quick story about a speech he gave, because I was at the Auto Workers, and part of my assignment was the Ford of Canada chain. And in a couple of places in Ontario, near London and in Oakville, there were plants that were set up after the Auto Pact was signed, which was a trade agreement that guaranteed a certain percentage of production here in Canada. And the truck plant, the Ontario truck plant in Oshawa, it had been a big seller. But of course, by this time, when Jack was leader, so we're talking 2003, 2004, there was no more Auto Pact. We had the Free Trade Agreement and NAFTA. And Ford announced the truck plant was closing. So people were all upset. They were worried about jobs, obviously. It was really upsetting. And Jack contacted me. He heard there was going to be a rally. He wanted to go speak. And I said, well, great. We'll go out together and we'll speak to this rally. Now, I don't know if any of you have been through an auto plant. These are fairly plain speaking people. And, not necessarily all New Democrats, for sure. And I don't know what Jack was expecting. I think he maybe thought there was going to be a lectern like here and a room that you would speak in. We get there, and I think I had to go before him, and somebody handed me a megaphone, and we had to jump up in the back of an F-150, because that's what they built there, was the F-150 truck. And I knew a lot of the people, so I felt comfortable. And Jack, I knew, didn't feel comfortable, but what I felt was his absolutely genuine identification with the insecurity of the workers there. And he didn't, at that point, always have all of the right language, but he was genuine and committed in his support for those workers. And the one thing I learned about working with him over a number of years was what a learner he was. He was a good listener, and if he did something and he felt it didn't just work quite right, he learned, and he got so much better. And you saw it in every election that he ran in. Every election we got more seats, and I think if he'd run in 2015, we'd have had a new Democratic government in this country. That's my story.
I completely agree. John, share us your stories with, I know that you know Jack for many, many years, but share us your story of as he became leader and your connection.
Well, I actually knew Jack before he got elected to city council, so I know him back into the 1980s or even the late 70s. I was involved in municipal reform politics and a carpenter. And he got elected to city council in 82, and I got elected as a rep of the Carpenters Union in 82. And the connection was about thinking of city building in a way that empowered ordinary people. Ordinary working people, families, no matter how described, that would be able to shape what was going on in their neighborhood and their communities, and also the kinds of work opportunities that would be available. Because 1982 was a tough time. High interest rates, recession in construction, people were desperate for work. And then I'll move forward a little bit to 92 and 93. A decade later, the downturn in construction was unbelievable. The Reichman Empire had collapsed. The whole real estate industry was gone. By that time, I'd become the head of the Building Trades Council. We had 30% of our members unemployed. People were losing their job, or they'd lost their jobs. They were losing their homes, families splitting up, suicides. People were desperate. But Jack was the kind of person that would bring people together for solutions. And I'll always remember sitting on Huron Street on the kitchen table of Jack and Olivia's house, And he brought together environmental engineers like Greg Allen, developers, construction workers like me, and said, how do we imagine a different kind of prosperity? And there was an energy retrofit program that we'd heard of one company doing. He said, what if we could make that a city program? He had just lost his bid for mayor, and he was a free agent. But Peter Tabbins and Rob Maxwell are on city council, and they moved forward something called the Better Building Partnership as a concept of going to building owners and saying, we could retrofit your building and dramatically reduce your electricity and utility costs, and it won't cost you a penny. We'll raise the money and we'll take the difference in savings for a period of time, like 3.24 years. We'll just get that difference, and then we're done, and you're now running this building. People said, that's crazy, you know, nobody will believe it. Jack was hired on to plan that program. After we got it passed through City Council by one vote, it became the Better Buildings Partnership. We put thousands of people back to work. Women and men in the apprenticeships who were just, you know, were desperate to be able to finish that time, got a job. They totaled up the numbers from that one program, 46,000 years worth of work from one municipal program that came out of the collaboration and the relationship building that Jack did. And that allowed us to go in all kinds of other places and say, you know what, green jobs is a reality. And not just in this country. Some of the stuff south of the border that you're seeing that Biden has done comes directly back to conversations in the construction unions here, New York City, and elsewhere that have led to that concept that we can have good jobs and we can be sustainable and we can make a better future for all of us.
Wonderful. Yeah, that's excellent. Thank you for highlighting that, John, because that's, and he talked about that in his books that he published 2004, and then I think the second one was just a handful of years later. But that's a beautiful way, because there were so many other times throughout, you know, we fought in Ottawa for national retrofit programs, and so much of his work in Ottawa as leader of the New Democratic Party of Canada came from his municipal times. And it took some time for the staff to, or at least for some of those that didn't work with him at City Hall, to be mindful of that so many things that he championed in Ottawa were things that he had championed here in the city of Toronto. Thank you for that. I want to switch gears quickly. There was, and I think, and we all want to talk about this, shortly after the 2011 election, this is June 25th of 2011, after the May 2nd, Jack led the party to its greatest electoral victory, 103 seats, but the Conservatives had a majority government under Stephen Harper. Lisa Raitt was the Labour minister, and there was a lockout by Canada Post of the Canadian Union of Postal Workers. There was rotating work actions around the country throughout this time. And in the third week of June, Minister of Labour tabled back to work legislation. Now, we had in the party, just to tee it up for folks that who haven't read their history as closely as some of us have lived it, we had 70 brand new elected members of parliament. We had 103 MPs, 70 were brand new. Jack had his hip challenges. Jack had previously announced that he was fighting off some health issues. And the back to work legislation triggered a very significant event at that time, and I think it still holds to be incredibly relevant. 58-hour filibuster that Jack led. He started off on the Thursday night. He gave an hour-long speech on the importance of the right to free collective bargaining. And we've just seen this recently, which was one of the triggers that led the party today to end the confidence and supply agreement arrangement with the Liberal Party of Canada, and is putting us into a new kind of era here. But I want to go back and I want to hear from each of our panelists because I think you'll have tremendous insight. And obviously, Peggy, you were there on the front lines. I want to end with Peggy, but I want to start with John. I want to come to Ken, and then I want to end off with Peggy. Talk to us about what you saw that filibuster, Jack Layton, the leader of the official opposition, leading his brand newly elected team with 70 rookies, which gelled the caucus. It was an amazing time. It was just right after the election, just around the time of our convention, and Jack was not doing well physically. John, let me start with you. Talk to me about what your insights are about the importance of that filibuster to push back on that back-to-work legislation.
You know, it goes to the heart. This is a picture of Jack at our Labor Day parade just shortly before that, marching with Denis Lemelin, Jane Marsh, the president of CPW National and CPW Toronto, with a T-shirt, in orange T-shirt, by the way, that says, "Yo Harper, hands off the post office." But, you know, I'm a cancer survivor. So when you get that notice that something's going on in your body, you wonder, what is it that I want to do with the time I have left? And when I had seen Jack as his, you know, things were getting tougher and tougher, and then I watched and heard about and then watched him take part in that, to stand up for a fundamental right of working people, to withdraw our labor. It is a fundamental right. Because in 1872, 24 printers went on strike for the 9-hour day against the Globe and Mail. And they were jailed for criminal sedition. And 10,000 people in Toronto came to the streets demanding their freedom and union rights in a city which was only about 30,000 people. So like every second adult came out to say workers have the right to withdraw their labor to get a better deal for their lives. And for Jack to use that little bit of energy he had left to stand for that principle, that speaks volumes to who Jack Layton was.
Agreed. Ken.
Yeah, look, one thing about Jack, Jack walked the talk, and the fact is that he's never shied away from any of the fights. And if you look at what's happening just more recently, is that you have people, politicians that run on the left and governor on the right, and that's exactly what's happened. They'll tell you one thing but do the opposite. And one thing about Jack, he stood with the workers through each and every opportunity that he had. And my earlier point that I was going to make is that he also was prepared to take the global fight on. And one of the stories I didn't have time to tell at the beginning is that it warms my heart, because the fact is that we were very much involved with a union in Mexico called Los Mineros, and a guy by the name of Napoleon Gomez, who ended up being in exile in Canada for 12 years. And what happened is there was a mine explosion in February of 2006, where 65 miners got killed. 63 of them are still buried today. The fact he called it industrial homicide, and Vante Fox was the president at the time. We had a relationship with the miners' union because they've also assisted us with some of the facilities that we have in America. When we were on strike, they would lay down their tools. And what ended up happening, Napoleon had to come to Canada because of the fact that they were going to arrest him and jail him, which they did with some of his other officers. He was in Vancouver for a period of 12 years, and he got to know Jack. And one of the things is Mexico was trying to extradite him. It was Jack Layton that went to Prime Minister Harper and delivered a letter in regards to that, we're going to fight this extradition if you try to do it. And Prime Minister Harper backed off. Then, because he had one of his workers that were jailed, one of his officers that was jailed for 2 years, 2 months, and 20-some days without a charge, we put on a massive campaign globally. We took a whole bunch of delegations, international delegations, to Mexico City. And who come with us? Jack Layton. While Jack Layton was there, who did he meet with? Because of his high profile, it was with the Ministry of Labor. And the fact is that, we're going to be supporting these workers throughout. So that's the kind of individual. When you talk about, I talked about Valley, what he did at Valley's, the picket lines, the union halls. And again, he walked that talk. And the fact is that politicians today, he goes onto the picket lines. How many of the politicians you see today at CN Rail or any of those others, you don't see the politicians, but he was always there at the forefront, and that's the leadership that he's provided. And I've always been in debt to him for what he's done, because Napoleon Gomez, once he then went back to Mexico, he became a senator. He's now a senator, and he's now in the House of Commons in Mexico, and that's what that brought about.
I thank you, Ken, for that. And I think that's true. Even though Jack did not come from the labor movement himself, I think that there was an authenticity that he had when he spoke and when he acted, and he was always comfortable around the union movement, around union leaders. And, you know, some politicians today, I want to get to this next, but I want to get to Peggy, of course. Peggy Nash was the member of parliament for Parkdale High Park after the 2011 federal election. And we were talking about this earlier. I believe, and I'll fact check this later, but allow me to say it with it emphatically now. The first labor activist to be the official opposition, finance critic of the official opposition. Jack appointed Peggy in that portfolio after the May 2nd election. And Peggy was there in that caucus. She was in previous caucuses, of course. But Peggy, I would love to hear your insight into what it was like. I mean, you were there when the caucus was obviously much, much smaller, and we were not the official opposition. And this issue of fundamental principle, whether you agree with the right to free collective bargaining or you're going to legislate it back, which is what the Tories, the Conservatives wanted to do. You were in that caucus, 70 new colleagues, many of them from the province of Quebec, many of them with very little background in the trade union movement and very little understanding as to how Parliament works. Tell us a little bit about what that was like, and what are your insights from that 58 hours of the filibuster?
Yeah, so as you said, Brad, that Jack had just come through this election campaign. And if you remember, if you were here then, that he had a cane, and, you know, because he was in pain, he was ill. And, but he was, you know, the media described him as a happy warrior. And he was optimistic, he was inspiring. And, you know, I just before the election, I remember we have a big Polish community in our area. It's the Polish festival this weekend and the Ukrainian festival. If you're interested in coming to Parkdale High Park.
Don't bring your car, there's no parking.
There's no parking. But we went to an event because of a downed airliner had killed some senior people in Poland. So we went to that commemoration. I'll never forget leaving that with Jack. And these women coming, I was walking with him, and these women were kind of swarming us, like older women who just wanted their picture taken with Jack. And I thought, something's happening here. Like, you could feel this change. And, you know, I'm always very, when I'm running for election, I'm always running from behind and feeling like it's, you know, it's not going to work out. And I remember, I just have to tell this short story. Easter weekend, we went to Jack asked if there was a church in our area that he could come to and go to the service. And I'm probably going to cry. I don't want to do that. But so we sat together in this service, and I said to him that I'm not sure we can do it here, but I really want to thank you and the federal party, because I know you have thrown everything into this, and I really appreciate it. And I'm thinking, well, we're not going to win because it's just going to be too hard, because we had won, but we had lost before. And he just looked at me and he smiled and he said, it'll be okay. And at this point, he's struggling, right? And at the end of this service. They had us come up and we all sang hallelujah. It was very moving. Anyway, we get elected. There's this massive number of New Democrats elected. I was so excited I didn't even realize there was a conservative majority government. So that was a little bit of a downer. But we get there, and almost immediately, very shortly afterwards, the Conservatives imposed binding final offer arbitration on this postal dispute. And it was a lockout. I mean, the government could have opened the doors and let people go back to work. It wasn't a strike, it was a lockout. And, you know, Jack could have just given a speech and that was it. But he did two things that were so wonderful, and I will never forget. The first thing is he gave this incredible hour-long speech, and it was probably the finest speech I have ever heard him deliver. And it's online, you can get it. It's very inspiring about the fundamental human right to be able to withdraw your labor, internationally recognized, part of our Constitution, and that the government was violating it. But the second really important thing he did, as you said, Brad, all these new MPs, you know, I remember in Quebec, 59 of the 75 MPs were from Quebec. This was an earthquake. And a lot of them, you know, they were young. Remember the McGill Four? These were kids in school. There were small business owners, you know, there were professors, there were doctors, there were labor activists, but not many. And what he said was, we're going to filibuster, and every single person in that caucus is going to deliver a speech about supporting the postal workers and on the right to strike. And I will never forget, because it went right through the night. Like my speech, I think, was halfway through, I don't know what hour. But in behind the House of Commons, there's what's called a lobby where MPs can prepare their remarks. And it was bustling. Like, you know, people were in there, they were looking stuff up, they had their computers. And so you had, say, an environmentalist or a community leader or a food bank operator or a social worker. And they're trying to equate their experience, maybe supporting human rights, supporting the environment. They're trying to equate that experience to what it meant to have the right to strike. So they were identifying with free collective bargaining. And that was so inspiring to hear those speeches. They all had to figure it out. And Jack created not just the opportunity, but the requirement for them to do that. And so everybody had a quick lesson in what it meant to have labor rights. And I'll just never forget it. And it changed people's lives. Like they said, I never thought about that before. I just thought about, well, mail wasn't going to get delivered instead of the human rights aspect. So I think we owe him a debt of gratitude. It was always his authentic belief. And he didn't just go through the motions, he actually proved it. And, you know, shortly after, we lost him. So anyway, I thank him.
It would have been 8 weeks later after that 58 hours. Thank you for that, Peggy. And to both. I want to move to, on the verge, I want to get to the future in a second, to look forward. The anti-scab legislation that was recently passed in the House of Commons was a component of the confidence and supply agreement that Leader Jagmeet Singh and the caucus had placed, as one of the conditions to support, in addition to things like pharmacare and other healthcare initiatives. Jack was always a fighter for anti-scab. Now, we've got mixed bag across the land in terms of legislation that is supportive. But let me just ask each of you in turn. In terms of, anti-scab is good, but I think that we're far from where we need to be to recalibrate the legislative agenda in terms of making it fair and balanced. After anti-scab, where do we go next? And where do folks see that the legislative agenda needs to go? Where should the labor movement be fighting in terms of what's next? And what lessons can we learn from Layton's legacy in terms of, I think he laid the groundwork, to be honest with you. I think the reason why we have anti-SCAP today, even though the Liberals had promised it for many, many years, one of the reasons I think is that Layton was so impactful, 10 short years ago. Where do we go next, Ken? And what do you see is the next legislative fight, either at the provincial or federal level, for the labor movement and the party?
Well, first of all, on the anti-SCAP stuff, you're right, is that this has been on the agenda for some time, and the NDP's talked about it. It's been in the Liberals' platform. They voted against it. So finally, because of the supply agreement, that the pressure was on. And can you imagine that 100% of the Conservatives voted in favor of the anti-SCAP? Well, guess why? Because you've got elections just basically around the corner. I guess that when you look at where do you go from here, what's our major next legislative change? The fact is, if you look at organizing workers, in Western Canada, we had the opportunity of having numerous new democratic governments. We've got card check, we've got all those things that we did. But in many cases, they're short-lived because when the government changed, the pendulum swung the other way. One of the things that we really have to get our heads around, and I think this is the party has to move forward, is sectoral bargaining. You have a lot of vulnerable workers out there that don't have access to, the gig workers and the service workers that don't have access to sectoral bargaining and to organizing. It's difficult, and the density just continues to drop. I had the opportunity of being in British Columbia when Mike Harcourt was the premier, and he put together John Bagent and Vince Reddy. And they come with a recommendation. One of the panels was that, the labor movement has to start looking beyond that, or the governments have to start looking beyond that. So to me, from a trade union activist and someone that's been involved in organizing and trying to move the needle in regards to making sure we help the vulnerable and the people that need that protection, that's something that the movement has to put its mind to. And the fact to me, from the labor's perspective, besides the card check and all those things that we've had many cases, and when the pendulum swings the other way, it's all taken away. But that's a thing we have to think about going forward.
We have to make these as popular as possible so that the Conservatives don't take it. Peggy, and then John, what's next, Peggy, in terms of the fight legislatively?
Well, remember when Bob Rae was premier, he brought in anti-SCAP and Mike Harris removed it, one of the first things he did. So I expect that if the Conservatives win the next election, that'll be on their agenda. And I also suspect that that's the reason they acted so quickly in the rail strike, because they couldn't bring in scabs. There's a number of things that can be done. Sectoral bargaining would make a huge difference for the many gig workers that we increasingly have. Changes to the temporary foreign worker program that give workers the right to change employers, the right to organize, basic labor rights. I also think there's changes that can be made. It would be useful for the labor movement to have a stable of measures, just in case lightning strikes and we end up in government federally. That, there are things we can do even with the Wagner model of organizing and collective bargaining, where it's workplace by workplace. For example, in some countries, you don't need a majority of workers to vote. You could have a minority of workers and they get collective bargaining rights. Why couldn't we have that? There's a variety of things that we could do to enhance workers' rights. And I think that the labor movement needs to have these ready, but the most important thing is to not let Pierre Poilievre become the prime minister, because I think that's very dangerous.
Yeah. John, any thoughts on where we go next?
I'm going to ditto the last thing that Peggy just said. Our movement did a lot of work in preparation for the changing workplace for you here in Ontario. We laid out a whole series of things that needed to be done, including bringing back card check. Once people are able to, and supporting people against the intimidation and the horrific thing that happens mostly when you put in that application to certify, and then the ability to bargain in today's economy and the way that it is changing. And it was a fissured workplace that was described there. And, we need to put structures in place that allow working people to A, organize, because on the private sector side, we're down. I come out of construction. I learned very early on that slogan, you organize or die. Because every tender is new, everyone comes up, non-union is there, they smashed our unions all through Western Canada. We saw that. And our movement as a labor movement, we don't pay enough attention to saying organizing unrepresented workers is actually priority number one. It's good to get a better collective agreement, an extra nickel an hour. But if there's hundreds of thousands of people out there that deserve to have a collective voice and that don't have it yet, that's got to be something. And I think that inspiration that Jack showed us, that people need to have a voice. And we got to fix every damn element of what's wrong, but also imagine, like decree systems or other entities that can give people in this fissured economy a whole lot about an opportunity to have collective voice.
Yeah. Last round. Yeah, thank you. Last question. And I want to pick up, it's something that Ken mentioned, but we're all kind of, I think we've alluded to it. And that is, in 2011, Jack was able, through many, many years, working hand in hand with the union movement, the affiliated unions with the party. I think that we saw the greatest level of unionized workers voting for the New Democratic Party since the dream was established in the late 50s and early 1960s. 61. The dream was to have a party of working men and women. And we have had, I think, mixed results, if I may be fair, as a party activist. And in 11, I think we came the closest we have to getting working men and women in significant numbers to come to the New Democratic Party for a whole host of reasons. Maybe it was the policies. They always like the policies. Maybe it was Jack. It was Jack. One thing that's transpired since Jack's passing, the conservative movement here in Canada, in the United States, and in the Commonwealth, and the world over, the Conservatives are going after working men and women, blue collar, particularly men. We see it in Doug Ford. We see it in the Republicans in the States. We see it in Boris Johnson when he broke through on the Red Wall in the UK, two national elections ago for them. And we see it the world over. We see it in Australia, where the Conservatives are going after our people. I think that we, allow me to bias the tone of the conversation, we bear some, if not a large portion of that when we deviate from the focus that these working men and women want to see. But the Conservatives are coming after us. They're coming after our working men and women vote cohort. And that concerns me tremendously as a practitioner, not in the labor movement, but in the political realm. And I see this in the Saskatchewan election coming up. And Ken, you're a Saskatchewan born and raised. We spent time, I'm born and raised in BC. We got the BC election happening now. We're going to be at the polls and fighting in Ontario in the spring. We're going to be at the federal, likely shortly thereafter. We're going to have major elections. Most of our country are going to the polls in the next 18 months. And the Conservatives are consistent in their call for the working men and women to come to them. And that concerns me tremendously. Even if it doesn't actually transpire, the talk of it starts to put fear in our people, it excites their people, and the media normally get it wrong. Maybe I'll start with John, come to Peggy, and then end with Ken. Talk to us about your insights into what the Conservatives are doing and what we need to do as Social Democrats and as union supporters and as New Democrats, what we need to do to stave off this onslaught of approach to our working men and women votes. John, start us off.
It's a tough question. I'm talking to people, national leadership from all across the country, trying to puzzle out how do we defeat this momentum of right-wing populism, as you said, it's sweeping across the world. And again, as somebody who comes from construction, I'm heartbroken when I hear the conversation of the job shacks in the direction it's going. In the labor movement and the labor council, when Hudak was coming along, we made a decision. We were going to put a program together that was going to be intentional, that was going to be challenging, and that was going to be effective, and we were going to track whether or not our affiliates were going and talking to their members. And that was about, is it worth paying union dues? Because he was talking about right to work, right? Now, they're not talking about that crap now. I mean, he wrote op-eds about right to work in the National Post years back, but he's not talking about that today. I believe that the entire movement, the formal party, trade unions, civil society, and I'm part of the chair of the Council of Canadians, have an obligation to go into our constituencies to create a conversation piece, to actually make the expectation of everybody who's on staff. How many of you talked today? Everybody who's in elected leadership, when did you last go into a workplace and have this conversation? And actually say, this is part of the expectation of the Canada that we're going to build together. Because where they're going to take us, this tax revolt populism, we understand it's a vehicle that's going to cause a lot of pain if they come into power. But having those honest conversations now and taking the time and listening to what people are saying and then shaping the answer based on, the experience. What people have done before. In the 1970s, we fought and won rent controls so that people wouldn't have their rents jacked up. We got a speculative tax in Ontario put on top of people flipping properties so that a young family could afford to do it. We won those things when we did them together. And I think drawing the best experiences of our history and talking to people about what's to be garnered from that experience, but making sure that every one of us is spending the time having those difficult conversations and coming out of it, and we will rebuild a movement that people can believe in.
Peggy, next. In 48 hours, we have 2 by-elections, Elmwood-Transcona and LaSalle-Emard-Verdun. We won both of them in 2011, of course. Elmwood-Transcona, and Peggy, I'm prefacing your commentary because the New Democrats are up against a conservative. It's orange versus blue. We are up against an electrician who's got his local union support. I don't remember a time when we were up against conservatives who got any union support to this significance. It's an indication of where we're at. And I just want to kind of amplify the point before you talk as a former member of that caucus. What do you think the conservatives are doing with the Labour vote, and what do we need to do to push back?
Well, first of all, there has always throughout history been a section of the labor movement that has been attracted to conservatism. It's not a brand new phenomenon. But I do think coming from a union that's predominantly private sector, that, where not just tens, but hundreds of thousands of union jobs were lost over the last generation, that there's a section of working class men who feel like nobody really cares about them. And I think they are particularly vulnerable to the message of the right-wing populists who say it's the fault of international financiers, or it's the fault of people who are coming here from another country, or it's the fault of women, or, pick a scapegoat. And I think, having said that as a labor movement, we haven't always been clear enough about the class interests of our members. I don't think we have, we give lots of great technical training, health and safety, and stewards' responsibilities, and how to interpret your collective agreement. I don't know that we have always talked about the class interests of workers versus employers, and the role that government can play that too often sides with employers. Because I don't think people always see, otherwise people would see through the Poilievres and the Boris Johnsons and others and say, well, that guy's not working in my interest, you know? But they're very good communicators. They have punchy, memorable language. And it can be compelling for someone who feels that no one's on their side. So the job for the union and for the party is to show that we're on their side and not allow them to get seduced by really negative anti-immigrant, anti-human rights messages. And I think, you know, it's something we always should have been doing. But I know in my own union, I think we used to do a better job of that, of helping people understand that. And then, anyway, I could go on about this because I feel quite strongly about it. I think there's a lot of young men who feel nobody's looking out for them. And then Poilievre comes along and he says, I hear you. I'm fighting for you. God knows what he's planning, what his proposals are. Well, I know what they are, but they're not good.
Bring us home.
Well, I mean, it's just to Peggy's last point in regards to that we used to do better. And I think, as you said, I'm from Saskatchewan. I've never lost sight of that. Coming from a family that was close to Tommy Douglas, and my career in Western Canada as elected leader for the West, and we had governments in the provinces I mentioned earlier. In my entire career, be it district or national, I've never ever wavered from my partisan roots in regards to supporting the NDP. There wasn't an election that had gone by that I didn't go out and send a letter to Oliver and the constituency and whatnot. So we've been very vocal. We've also encouraged people to run. Who better than be an MP? And one sitting next to me, Peggy Nash, come from the grassroots and basically ran. And the steelworkers have many across the country. Currently, the Labour Minister in British Columbia is a steelworker. Rachel Notley was a steelworker. The list goes on and on and on. We've put our money where our mouth is in regards to trying to educate our members. We invested. We tried to train the members. Bob Gallagher was sitting out here when he was with the steelworkers. That was one of the roles that he played with, and we've never ever second-guessed. We'd never been involved in the strategic voting and all those other things. I also had the opportunity to sit around the table, be it the Federation as a vice president, or be it the CLC. If you go back in the history, if you want to talk about that, the CLC was partners with the CCF when it first was formed. And the fact of the matter is, unfortunately, and I've been around that table, I've had my battles with numerous folks, the fact is that people have wavered off, basically gone out to support other parties and whatnot. And when you go to a convention, when someone tries to pass a resolution that says it's unconstitutional, that we should be affiliated, that's a concern. So we as individual trade unions, I can only speak for my organizations that I've been duly elected to, is that we've never ever wavered. And this, I can tell you, the BC election, back when Horgan got elected, the steelworkers were out in the forefront. We may have taken a lot of flack from some of the media people because we put our money where our mouth is. I've been involved in all those elections throughout the country. And so again, it's about education workers, that you're much better off with the NDP than you are with the folks that they'll run on the left and governor on the right. So that's the challenge we have.
And Ken, let me just finish off. You and the steelworkers were always there for Jack. I'll say it again publicly because we may not say that enough, and we happen to, maybe that's why we're having the event here, but always unwavering support. And I know that Jack, what you were saying about his honorary card was absolutely true. He had it in his wallet next to his health card every day. So absolutely. I want to, we'll end there. We'll carry on the conversation afterwards, of course. I don't know if anybody's going. The bar is open. I just want to thank, what a tremendous panel. This is amazing. These are icons of the labor movement, friends, and crucial to Jack Layton and his leadership. So thank you, Ken Newman. Thank you, Peggy Nash. Thank you, John Cartwright. And thank you, Josh. And thanks to the Foundation and to the Institute for having us here tonight. So back to you. Thank you so much.
I got to tell you, that was one of the most enjoyable panels we have ever hosted. That was amazing. I got to tell you, I love good labor stories, and those are just terrific. It's one of the things I love most about being a proud member of the party, our party. Yes, the fun we used to have. We're going to talk after. I got some news for you. Some good times ahead. You know, folks, I want to thank Brad. He thanked the panel. I want to thank Brad. Brad, you bring such a good... You just do it so well, so entertaining, so factual. However, I do have one quick correction. I got to do it. I got to fact check. All right. Despite what that conservative candidate in Elmwood, Transcona says, the business manager for Local 2085 is supporting the NDP candidate, Layla Dance, and that local has now joined the coalition to support the NDP candidate in that riding. And it looks like that electrical worker, we won't even name the person, was trying to imply that they had the support of the union local. I think what they meant is that they had some friends. Right. I should also say, you know, it was the outgoing MP Daniel Blakey was a proud 2085 electrician with the IBEW. So there you go. Love it. Okay, I also I have something a little special. It just came in, so we're going to do it real quick. It is a video from our mayor, Olivia Chow, who wanted to be here tonight. However, she was unable. So we're going to go ahead and play that video for everybody. It's right here.
To all my friends that are attending tonight, I'm sorry I can't be with you, but thank you for attending to celebrate Jack Layton's legacy. The legacy of love, hope, and optimism. I see it in the award recipients and who you are celebrating. We appreciate and celebrate their contribution in making the city and the world a better place to be for everyone. And to the union leaders that are in the room, thank you for all the years of support. We know we are stronger together. And best wishes for tonight's forum. And let us continue forward in lifting each other's up and continue our path in living a life full of love, hope, and optimism and changing the world together.
I thought that was just fantastic that we were able to put that in there. I know Olivia really did want to be here, as did a number of persons. We are going to move on to the last portion of the awards ceremony tonight, which are the awards. So it's my pleasure to invite back up former Douglas Colwell Layton Foundation board member and executive director of the Institute for Change Leaders, my good friend, Mike Perry.
Thanks again, Josh. You know, I used to kind of joke that, you know, you go to kind of an NDP Layton awards celebration and a panel discussion breaks out. You know, it wouldn't be an event without a panel discussion. But I think tonight we see especially why. To go down memory lane, to be inspired by those values, those stories, and as Josh said, to have that lived experience with us here in the room. Let's hear it again for our panel. So much in Jack's memory. And Olivia had just mentioned changing the world and changing the world together. So maintenant, on va passer la parole un petit peu. Où est-ce qu'on est sur le programme? C'est qu'on va faire, c'est on va tourner au spectacle pour illuminer, disons, les prix autochtones ici au Canada pour leur contribution et puis même plutôt à l'île de Turtis. Let's turn now to the Layton Indigenous Awards. Jack était un ami, un cher ami des peuples autochtones ici au Canada. Jack was a dear friend to Indigenous people here in Canada. was one of the first members of Parliament to stand up for an apology for residential schools, and was a big proponent and advocate working towards the Kelowna Accord. He was inspired by young Indigenous activists who were changing the world. He was an ally and a mentor and a brother. The Layton Indigenous Leadership Award carries on this important legacy by recognizing Indigenous activists who are powerful change makers and organizers throughout this country. So let's turn to those change makers at hand, shall we? First up, we have an honorable mention. Listen to this opening line. How's this for an opening line in an application for an award? And I quote, "Disrupting the status quo in medical education, we're going to build a new type of medical school that serves the community first." How's that? Hey, fantastic. This nominee says that they're including building meaningful relationships with Indigenous communities and organizations to co-create, underline co-create, well-resourced initiatives to recruit Indigenous learners and trains them to be change makers and leaders in the Canadian healthcare system. As an Indigenous health lead, this organization is involved in integrating Indigenous ways of being, knowing, and doing into the entire School of Medicine from the start. I need to say Tanshi, Yawao, Tanshi. Thank you very much. The honorable mention for the Layton Indigenous Award goes to the Toronto Metropolitan University Medical School, Jamaica Cass, who is doing the work there in this regard. I believe we have a video. There we are.
ਉਹ ਸਾਡੀ ਬੋਲੀ ਬੋਲਣਗੇ।
They would speak our language. They would understand our culture.
And our faith.
They would know my name, not just my symptoms.
They'd be there, so we don't always have to go to the ER.
We would be empowered to treat the symptoms and the cause.
We'd use AI to improve our quality of life and our quality of care.
We would have a place where we could treat patients and teach students.
We'd learn a holistic approach to medicine that sees the whole person, not just the patient.
We would deliver healthcare to those who need it most.
We would help to build a healthier and more equitable society.
Patients are asking for change. Doctors are asking for change. Communities are asking for change. Through a bold new approach to medical education, we are creating that change.
Saigo. My name is Jamaica Cass. I am a member of Gondege Turtle Clan. I want to first say a big kneel and goa for the honorable mention for the Jack Layton Indigenous Leadership Award. For me, leadership is about fostering a culture of listening. A leader should listen more than they speak. And to be in leadership is to be in service of community. And I really think that that is what I strive to do. I believe I'm the first Indigenous MD, PhD in the country. And I advocate for eliminating health disparities for Indigenous peoples in Canada. An honorable mention for an award like this is particularly meaningful because I know how hard I work every day, including weekends, to support elevating Indigenous health in every single way that I can. And if I'm an honorable mention, that means the winner must be absolutely phenomenal in doing their own powerful and challenging work every single day too. And so to them, I say congratulations, and please absolutely keep doing what you're doing. I'm coming to you today as an invited guest of the Anishinaabe peoples as well as Haudenosaunee, as I am representing Toronto Metropolitan University School of Medicine at the Toronto Metropolitan University Powwow. And I particularly enjoy urban powwows because I think they just showcase such a diversity of amazing Indigenous peoples. And I really enjoy having opportunities to see and participate in these. I apologize that I'm not able to join you there today. I am a primary care provider in my home community of Gondege. And so after this powwow, I need to go back home so that I can see my family and continue to do that really challenging but really rewarding work of serving my community and community. So again, I thank you so much for the honorable mention, and thank you so much for recognizing Indigenous leadership here in Goa.
There we have it. Access and champion Indigenous participation and leadership in public health, in the public healthcare system. It doesn't get much more Jack Layton than that. So I know the leadership panel that decided the awards was very excited to wish Toronto Metropolitan University School of Medicine all the best as it pursues these values. Now on to this year's recipient. This recipient strives and works hard to empower Indigenous women, gender diverse, and two-spirited people to thrive. They have a focus on the screen-based media sector, very timely right now, to TIFF being in Toronto. And this organization is committed to dismantling systemic and structural barriers that have kept Indigenous women, gender diverse, and two-spirited people from thriving in the screen-based media sector. Through training, mentorship, and advocacy, they work to provide the most effective pathways to success in film and the theater arts. Again, a cause very near and dear to Jack, arts and culture. And this year's recipient of the Layton Indigenous Award is the Shine Network Institute.
Hello. I'm honored to accept this award on behalf of the Shine Network Institute. Jennifer Podemsky, who's the founder and CEO, asked me to read something on her behalf. So I invite you to imagine her saying these words to you. I couldn't think of a more fitting acknowledgement. I was always a big supporter of Jack Layton and the values he upheld. And since launching the Shine Network Institute, I am more aware than ever how those same values illuminate our path, even during the most difficult times. We all know that Jack Layton was a white guy. So it's funny that he led the way very much like an Indigenous woman, always keeping community and humanity at the center, leading by listening and uplifting the voices of the most vulnerable. This is why this award means so much, and I'm sorry I can't be here to accept it. I want to thank Jennifer Dehaan, who's reading this, so that's a bit weird. But without her, the Shine Network would not exist. Miigwech to the judges, many of who I know, and thank you to the Layton Legacy for awarding the Shine Network Institute with the Indigenous Leadership Award. Please visit our website, shinenetwork.ca, and find out more about our work in the screen sector as we endeavor to dismantle systemic barriers for Indigenous women and create pipelines to success. Miigwech.
Thanks very much. And just on a personal note, it's a very humbling honor to be able to present the Indigenous Leadership Award. I want to thank Josh and the Foundation for the opportunity to do so. Also, before I leave the stage, I want to acknowledge some of the board of directors from ICL that are here, Bob Gallagher, Liz, where's Liz? There we go, Liz Harvey, and our director of programs, Emrit Parhar. Now for the Layton Award, I call upon Sarah to come and present.
Not intimidating at all as the non-political Layton in the room. So thank you for the runner-up and in particular for the winner who's here with us today for sharing your inspiring work with us. Each year we get a diverse round of applicants from all over, and this year was no different. It's exciting to learn about so many change makers and hear the work that they do all across the country. Although their innovative ideas make life more difficult for our judges, who of course need to select someone, it does make us optimistic for the future. So now for the honorable mention. This organization designs a program for Black youth and provides them with a unique, transformative experience that empowers them to develop and grow their social and professional engagement skills. They focus on developing their leadership skills and addressing the inequality that is happening in schools, homes, and community by providing Black children with a toolbox for success. Please join me in giving a round of applause for this year's Activism Honorable Mention, which goes to EDGE Youth Program. I'm not sure if we had a video or anything for EDGE. Okay, I will continue. And now for the 2024 Jack Layton Activism Award. This year's recipient is the City for All Women Initiative based in Ottawa. Congratulations. They are pioneering the advocacy for a caring cities framework, transforming urban planning across Ottawa and other Canadian municipalities to prioritize gender equity. Their activism centers on catalyzing policy change for gender equity, specifically to integrate the care economy, both paid and unpaid care work, into the heart of municipal planning. They embody Jack's spirit of organizing with love, hope, and optimism. And unfortunately, they are unable to be with us here today, but have shared a video. So if I'll give a round of applause to our winner.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for this incredible recognition. It is an honor to accept this award inspired by the legacy of Jack Layton, whose commitment to progressive change continues to guide us. Jack believed in the power of collective action and community organizing, values we hold deeply at Cowie. Cowie is a not-for-profit grassroots organization working towards a city that really cares for all. As intersectional feminists, we are committed to ensuring that municipal governments systematically consider the perspectives of diverse, cis and trans women, girls, non-binary, and gender non-conforming people. By working alongside women and organizations, we aim to influence decision makers at the city level to create a more equitable and inclusive community.
At the heart of this work is our Caring Cities initiative, where we seek to build a more just and inclusive Ottawa by putting care at the center of urban planning. Cities like Barcelona and Bogota are leading the way with this framework, designing 15-minute neighborhoods that address the poverty time experienced by women caregivers, making essential services accessible within a short distance.
The City of Ottawa's commitment to 15-minute neighborhoods offer a prime policy opportunity to advocate for the integration of care needs, services, and patterns into urban planning. This work is about building communities where care, equity, and sustainability are priorities, not afterthoughts.
This year is also special because it marks Cowie's 20th anniversary. For 2 decades, we've been working to advance gender equity through policy change. We deliver civic engagement training, convene collective action, advocate for policy change, train organizations through our social enterprise Weave Change, and do community-based participatory research. To celebrate our 20th anniversary, we created a film celebrating Cowie's feminist city building over the last 20 years. Here are some teasers.
Cowie means a lot to me. When I first became a member, I was coming from a dark place, as in not really feeling that productive and didn't know what my life was going to be like. It's changed my life because I met people that have encouraged me and said, you have lots of lived experience, you are valuable. And of course, that just changes you, picks you up and it dusts you off and you feel so much better about it.
Cowie is in my blood. That I keep repeating and saying that. Cowie is me, for me, with me, for the community. Cowie gives me power, gives me go, encourage me to stand up and speak loud and speak out to the all different levels of government and citywide and city level to keep fight for our rights, for a clean, green, a great city and a beautiful city.
Well, anything is possible. And when you have a bunch of women coming together and really looking at what needs to be done, we can make a change.
The most rewarding part of my involvement with Cowie is, seeing the real positive changes in the lives of women and the broader community around. Whether it's through influencing policy, platforms, meeting with city officials, meeting with other officials, it's just simply creating a supportive work environment for all, and the networking is really key because you're networking with people that you can work in collaboration with, and you're all doing it for the betterment of the community.
It was great to work with Cowie, and the reason is because Cowie brought in people from a diverse background, people who had not been involved in city politics before, if I can say politics, but just city administration, city functions, and understanding what was there for them. I think that was really important, and that was helpful to me to know that there is a group, Cowie, that is bringing people together.
We want to thank the Jack Layton Legacy Initiative for uplifting activism in such a meaningful way. Together, we will continue to build the future Jack envisioned, one that is caring, inclusive, and full of hope.
Thank you.
You can go ahead and advance the slide from there. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Sarah. I really appreciate that. That was tremendous. And I'd like to congratulate all of our award winners this evening. The work that they do is just fantastic. I hope that you're all inspired by that level of engagement. We are so proud to be able to do this for community leaders who are really making a difference for all of us. That truly is the Layton legacy, and I think we can all agree on that. So I'd like to conclude. I'd like to say thank you to all of you who are here tonight. Thank you so much. I'd like to say thank you to everybody who participated, everyone who came and spoke. I'd also like to thank everybody who is watching from home as well. And I'd also like to thank our sponsors one more time. And so if you don't mind just moving that slide again for me. All right. Again, QP Ontario, the IBEW Local 353, always been good friends to the NDP, I will say. The OECTA, Ironworkers Local 721, Special thank you to them, to both the IBW and the Ironworkers Great Building Trades partners. Goldblatt Partners LLP, the Elementary Teachers Federation of Ontario, Molson Coors Canada, the Toronto and York Region District Labour Council, thank you so much for being here. Kavan Advertising, and then of course our partners, I'll do it backwards this time, I'll say AMAPSIO, UFCW Canada, the Canadian Teachers Federation, the Professional Institute of the Public Service of Canada, and the United Steelworkers, who have just been so supportive of everything we do. A big thank you to Ken, who really has made a big difference in ensuring that we get the support that we need, not just from the steelworkers in all of the districts across the country, but also reaching out to other union leaders to be able to support the work of our foundation. So with that, the event concludes. I'd like to thank all of you again. I will let you know this. We have food and dessert that has been put out. There's lots of it. Please help us eat it. And please do also enjoy a few beverages with us, and we can continue to talk and have conversation. So thank you again, and so concludes our event. Take care.